Welcome, Magnus here. I like to talk about cameras for video, so stick around and hit that like button if you like this video, and if I earn it, definitely subscribe. Today we're talking about the BlackMagic Pocket Cinema Camera 6K Pro. Because the names weren't long enough, we needed to add a Pro after it. Here we go. So BlackMagic had a conference today, and they were talking about a new camera, amongst other things like new switches that they added to their lineup, which looked pretty cool. But near the end of the whole conference today, they announced the BlackMagic Pocket Cinema Camera 6K. So I'll just call it like the 6K Pro, because that's what they announced, the 6K Pro, not the 6K. And this camera is a new camera in the line of their Pocket Cinema cameras. Before this, they had the first Pocket Cinema camera, which has been irrelevant for a number of years. Came out a few years ago. That was then followed up by the BlackMagic 4K, Pocket 4K. Then the Pocket 6K released about a year later. And now here we are, a couple of years removed from that, and the Pocket 6K Pro was announced. Now, I did a video back when the Pocket 6K was announced, and I tell you, I did not have a positive opinion about them releasing that camera. I thought that the camera was really unnecessary and that it didn't have enough advantages over the Pocket 4K to make it a buy if you already own the 4K. For example, the price tag on the Pocket 6K was $24.95 when it was first announced, while the price on this was about $12.95. So that's over $1,000 less. And what features did you get? Well, you can record at 6K and you get an EF mount instead of a micro four thirds mount. That's about it. In fact, besides the higher resolution and the mount, there wasn't really any significant changes. Sure, you had a different type of sensor that can actually do a bit better when it comes to highlight roll-off on the 6K than the 4K, but for the most part, they were comparable. And I didn't think that just those minor upgrades was worth the near $1,000 difference between the cameras. And the fact that I can simulate a larger sensor when I attach a focal reducer, such as the Metabone Speed Booster. So based on that, there's no way I would consider the 6K an option when compared to the 4K. But just before recording this video, the Pocket 6K Pro was announced. The features that it has on it when compared to the 6K and the 4K, so far, from what was announced, is pretty amazing. First and foremost, a lot of people complained with this back touchscreen was that it wasn't tiltable. Sure, we understood we couldn't get a full flip screen based on the size, but at least make it tilt up and down. Well, they answered that calling, and the screen can actually tilt, which is amazing. Secondly, they also added, well, it's an EF mount, and on that EF mount and a larger camera body, slightly larger, it's not pocketable, so why would they call it that? They added the ability to have an internal ND filter. So it has internal ND filters. Basically, right around here on the top right of the display, it has plus and minus buttons that actually toggle the ND filters. Now, I don't know how many stops of ND that you get with those internal ND filters, but just having that without having to get like lens mounted ND filters is amazing, and that's definitely worth the upgrade. Another thing that I actually noticed when I first brought the 4K is that I missed the viewfinder. Now sure, for much recording, I haven't used the viewfinder even in my DSLR and mirrorless. Well, you can't use it on DSLR, but any of my mirrorless cameras, I haven't used the viewfinder. I've used the back screen, so I was used to that. But I was also used to seeing the viewfinder. And when I got this camera and it didn't have a viewfinder, I'll tell you what, I didn't miss it at first, but then when I was filming outside, I totally missed it. And I was wondering, why don't I have a viewfinder? I wish I did have a viewfinder. Well, they've answered that. It doesn't come on the body, but for a separate purchase, you can actually buy a viewfinder that works and is tiltable right for the camera. So you have it if you want it, but you don't necessarily need to buy that attachment for the camera. So that's pretty cool as well. Another change that people were asking for was the fact that BlackMagic has depended on Canon LPE6 batteries. And these LPE6 batteries don't last at all. In fact, on the 6K, they run out quicker than on the Pocket 4K. which was another reason I didn't want to pay $24.95 for the 6K. But they now use Sony batteries on the Pocket 6K Pro, which is amazing. Not only that, but the battery grip that you can purchase for it, you can add 2 more batteries for a total of 3 batteries on the Pocket 6K Pro to get you longer lasting record times. Now, if you don't understand the difference between the 6K Pro and the 4K and 6K battery grip, the 4K and 6K battery grip require you to actually have the battery door open, and part of it goes in the battery door, and then it has two batteries that you could put in the battery grip. So once you disconnect it, the camera's going to shut off. Well, they've gotten around that by instead having a mounting socket in the bottom of the camera that you can connect the battery grip to, and now have 3 batteries. That way it doesn't need to take up the battery port on the bottom of the camera, which is awesome. And you can replace those batteries with 2 new ones while the internal battery is still running the camera, and essentially never run out of battery life should you want to go that route. Like basically having 5 Sony batteries and then having 2 constantly charging as you're working, you can go on it without ever needing to plug yourself in. So, and you still have USB-C, full HDMI, and all the ports that you traditionally get on the 4K on the 6K Pro, with one added feature. They added a second mini XLR port on the side, so you can have even more audio sources when you're recording. So that's a lot of features that they've introduced with the 6K Pro. And they weren't done yet. They promised a firmware update within a month for the 6K Pro, the 6K, and the Pocket 4K for BlackMagic's new color science. So all of that was announced today. 6K Pro sounds like it is the answer that the 6K should have been a couple of years ago, but wasn't. And that was another reason why I didn't want the 6K, because it just didn't seem like it was worth the money at the time of announcement. But now you've got the 4K, 6K, and 6K Pro Pocket cameras, and a great choice. So if I was looking to get into these cameras, I actually might consider getting the 6K Pro versus the 4K or the 6K. But I'm so happy with my 4K, I'm still not upgrading to the 6K Pro. Not because it's not a great camera, but because I'm getting what I want with the 4K. So no problems there. But let me know, would you guys consider getting the 6K Pro over the other 2 cameras? Or do you think that the 4K and the 6K are still worth the buy and not spending all that money on the 6K Pro? Let me know in the comments down below. And as far as I know, it is probably the most inexpensive 6K camera for sale today. Am I wrong? Let me know in the comments down below. And as always, like, share, and you can make my day if you subscribe to Days Magnus, and I'm out. And you'll definitely hear more from me as I got a few tests coming soon. Take care, guys.